changes. You probably did. Yeah. Right? Yeah, it's just a whole simple question. It's a little bit hard, but that's okay. Joey.
Good evening, everyone. I will now call the May 16th, 2023 public hearing to order. The time is 7:02 p.m. Madam Clerk, can you please provide an overview of the public hearing procedures?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This public hearing is being held pursuant to sections 464 and 465 of the Local Government Act. The public hearing is being live streamed and recorded and will be available to the public for playback on the city website in accordance with Council Policy 3.12. The purpose of a public hearing is to allow all persons who believe their interest in property is affected by the proposed bylaws a reasonable opportunity to be heard or present written submissions respecting matters contained in the bylaw that is subject of the hearing. Council's role in a public hearing is to listen. This is not a forum for debate or comment by council, nor for gestures, remarks of support or opposition from council. All persons who believe that their interest in property is affected by the proposed bylaws will be asked to provide their name and address for the record before beginning their remarks to give council an idea of proximity to the application. Please note that comments can only be accepted regarding bylaws that are subject to this public hearing. For members of the public attending the public hearing in person who would like to speak, please approach the podium when the chair calls for public input. Please clearly state your name and address for the record before beginning comments. If you're participating electronically, please register as a speaker by raising your hand, turn on your camera, and clearly state your name and city of residence before beginning your comments. The corporate officer will confirm whether the statutory requirements for the public hearing have been met. Planning department staff will give a presentation on the item, after which the chair will issue 3 calls for public comment on the bylaws. Each person wishing to speak shall be allotted 5 minutes to speak per call to a maximum of 15 minutes. Speakers are asked to provide their name and address before beginning their comments and to address only the issue at hand. Staff will respond to technical questions where possible. After the public hearing has been closed, council cannot receive any further communication, written or verbal, regarding the public hearing item. Further consideration of bylaws on the agenda will take place at the next regular council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we proceed, I would like to acknowledge that the City of Maple Ridge carries out its business on the traditional and unceded territory of the Katzie First Nation and the Kwantlen First Nation. We will now move into the public hearing. Madam Clerk, can you please introduce the first item and confirm whether the statutory requirements have been met?
Madam Chair, we are actually striking this item and we will have to reschedule this public hearing.
Thank you. With that being the case, we will move on to the next item. Can you please introduce the second item, Madam Clerk, and confirm whether the statutory requirements have been met?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The item on tonight's agenda is application 2021-530-RZ The subject application is to permit the rezoning of the subject property located at 11410 207 Street from RS1 to RT2 to allow the future construction of a fourplex. The bylaw associated with this application is Maple Ridge Zone Amending Bylaw number 7816-2021, a bylaw to rezone the subject properties from RS1 single detached residential to RT-2 ground-oriented residential infill. The statutory requirements have been met for this public hearing with notices in the May 5th and 12th editions of the local newspaper, and 42 notices were mailed out. And one piece of correspondence was received in favor and distributed to council. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have staff available to make a presentation?
Thank you, Council. Item here, 2.2 on the agenda for 2021-530 RZ is for 11410 207th Street for zoning amending bylaw number 7816-2021. This area is designated, the subject property is designated low density multifamily residential. It is currently zoned RS1 single detached residential. It's proposed to be rezoned to RT2 ground oriented residential infill. The existing site area is approximately 1/4 of an acre and 4 units are proposed. This is a location of the property on the subject map, cadastral map of the city on 207th with 114th Avenue and Gulf Lane Avenue to the north. This is the subject property showing it in the low density multifamily designation in the Hammond plan. This is the subject property here on the ortho photo showing the built environment around the area, mainly single family lots at this time. And the development proposal is noted is to rezone the subject properties RT2 ground oriented residential infill to permit the construction of a fourplex. All the units in the proposal are 3 bedrooms and have an office and flex space in the basement level and will range in size from approximately 1,777 square feet to 1,841 square feet. The proposal includes 2 driveways to the site. Each will service 2 of the units. There's 1 driveway from the lane and 1 from 114th Avenue. Each access will serve 2 of the units. 8 resident parking spaces are provided as required in the zoning bylaw, and all have side-by-side 2-car garages. And there is 1 parking stall, bicycle parking stall incorporated into each garage unit. Community amenity contribution that would be applicable if the application proceeds to adoption is $22,800. The fourplex frontage is oriented to 207th Street, and it creates an attractive residential street presence. Each unit has a pedestrian access to the main floor as well as to the basement to 3 of the units. Additional basement access is also located on the southern side of the building for 1 of the units. There's decorative fencing and landscaping to create a separation from the street and provide privacy between each of the units. The primary outdoor amenity space is being provided in the form of private patio space for each unit. This is a subject site plan showing the lane to the north, 207th Street to the west, and 114th to the south, with the driveways leading down to 114th Avenue to the south and the lane to the north. These are renderings of the building from the different perspectives shown on the labels, showing it as a residential character, fourplex in neo-traditional style. And here are the elevations of the project, showing it from the center one is from the west elevation on 207th, and the east elevation to the interior driveways coming from the north and south is facing to the east, and then the north and south elevations at the top of the slide. So zone amending bylaw was given second reading on April 25th, 2023 and forwarded to this public hearing. And the following terms and conditions will need to be met prior to final reading should this application receive third reading at the next council meeting. These include registration of rezoning servicing agreement and restrictive covenant, and the receipt of the necessary engineering security as outlined in the agreement, road dedication on the lane and the corner truncation as required, a geotechnical report to be completed and register as a covenant on title to address the suitability of the land for the proposed development, and restrictive covenants for stormwater management and for also prohibiting secondary suites and the removal of existing buildings. There's also the standard requirement to confirm that the environmental, what has been confirmed that the Ministry of Environment Site Disclosure Statement confirms that there's no Category 2 uses and no Stage 1 investigation report is required, and that there'd be a voluntary contribution, as previously mentioned, in the amount of 22,800 or such applicable rate at third reading of this application be provided as per the council amended contribution policy. Madam Chair and Council.
Thank you very much. Does any member of the public wish to comment on this item? And I'll just remind those in person, you're welcome to come down to the podium. You're also able to participate online. I will call for a second time. Does any member of the public wish to comment on this item? For the third time, does any member of the public wish to comment on this item? Okay, I will now call this public hearing item closed. Are we ready to move on to adjournment? Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was actually requested to explain the reason for pulling 2.1 off of the agenda. And there was an error in the report, and it had to do with the siting of the driveway. We would expect this maybe on the very next public hearing, which would be June 6th. So we'll have time to advertise it for that one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, having no further business, I will adjourn for the evening.